Greetings from the Holy Apple. We're on the day before the new month of Adar, 5778, 29th of Shvat, winding down the month of Shvat. Today's class is the second part of Killing Me Softly, the murder of Rabbi Itamar Ben Gal. When I was, I think maybe I was like 11 years old, there was this great song by Roberta Flack. It's called Killing Me Softly, with his song, if not mistaken. It's an unbelievable hit by Roberta Flack. Maybe she was supposed to be a boy and turned out to be a girl, Roberta Flack. Anyways, when things like this happen in Israel, when Jews are murdered, there's something called association, where certain situations remind you of a song, or a song reminds you of a certain situation. So when I'm in certain situations, it always reminds me of different songs when I was growing up or later on. That's the way I work. So this song immediately always comes to me, this Roberta Flack song, Killing Me Softly with Your Song. So that's the title. I want to tell you that I want to first thank those people out there in the internet world, like Tomer Devora and Home in Jerusalem and a few other sites that have enough courage to put up our classes on their various websites, which allow a lot of a different audience to listen to these classes. Unfortunately, our message is not heard too many places in the world, and this is how much more so in the English language. You could find here and there a couple, maybe a handful of people, maybe in Hebrew, but the message that we're getting across here, you're not going to hear anywhere else. And I really want to, in the name of people that are out there, really to thank these websites that post this on their, post these classes on their website. And if one of us wake up, myself, others wake up from the words, from the lessons to be learned, then, you know, according to the Zohar Kadosh, it was worthwhile for a person to come to this world for 70 years with all the hardships and all the tests that we go through. It was worth coming if we influenced one person. One person. How much more so? 2, 20, 200. So I wanted to really pass that important truth across. Thank you from all of us. Killing Me Softly. Should know that a few minutes after the murder of Rabbi Itamar at the Ariel Junction 8 days ago, within minutes, Israel is probably number one in cleaning up after an area has been hit by an attack. Israel is probably number one in the world as far as speed is concerned, cleaning it up and straightening everything out, and bringing everything back to order. And within a few minutes, they had taken away Rabbi Itamar to hospital, and traffic, the Arabs were allowed to travel, continue traveling freely after a couple of minutes after that attack, which is really amazing, as if nothing happened. Besides for that, there were a few hundred teenagers that the night after the murder. They went to a major intersection which is called Bad Shalosh, which allows Arabs to enter and exit the city of Shechem. And they went to that intersection and they blocked the roads. And there they were met with the Israel police riot group and were really roughed up. In fact, I have a student in my Talmud Torah that I teach, an Elon Moreh, a 10-year-old student, 10 years old, if you can believe this. And, you know, like these big guys, these riot police, you can imagine. They're not like midgets. And he was roughed up. He was kind of like beat up by these riot police. And the idea is that here these kids, these teenagers, some not even teenagers, they come out and they're really crying out. They're really yelling and screaming to the heavens, like, let's stop this process. Let's put an end to this right now. They're crying out, we want to put an end to this. And this is their way to articulate this pain. And they come out and they try to make life for the enemy difficult. Because how can a person compare what all these families, children, husbands, wives, friends, the Jewish people, what everyone's going through when they lose, when one of their loved ones, family members, friends, a fellow Jew is murdered, to think about, you know, those are for generations that, you know, that scar remains on a person's heart. So these kids come down, and unfortunately it's mostly kids. It's not people that are older, unfortunately. People should be there. I mean, I would have been there if I would have known about it, but a lot of times I don't have a phone, I don't have a cell phone, so many times I don't know. It's only if somebody calls me up and tells me about things that I'm able to arrive at them. But it's pretty disgusting that the message that Israel is giving is that we want to return things as quick as possible back to order. Back to order means the continued attack on Jews, murder on Jews. In fact, there's a woman that lives not too far away from here, in fact, maybe about 5 kilometers from here, in a place called Richter, which was set up in the memory of a woman named Rachel Druk, who was murdered around here 20 years ago. Of course, who remembers Rachel Druk? And there is a woman that she puts out, she has like a website, she puts out a daily report on all the attacks in Judea and Samaria. It's an amazing thing. Nobody knows about it. I'm talking about people in Israel. I'm not talking about people out there, you know, over the sea. I'm talking about people in Israel. It's hushed up. It's hushed up because we want to give a feeling as business as usual. And it's disgusting because every single day, all over Judea and Samaria and other places in Israel, it's not just Judea and Samaria. Don't think that if you live outside Judea and Samaria, in Jerusalem or other places, Ramle, Lud, it's all over. But especially in our area, it's much more felt. And every single day there are dozens and dozens of attacks on Jews. With God's help, they don't always end in murder. Sometimes they don't end in injury. But the attacks remain on the hearts of the Jews that were attacked. Because, you know, there's a disgusting remark that's made on the news. It's nobody was injured, nobody was hurt. Can you imagine that statement? That statement should be taken and thrown out, trashed. No one was hurt. No one was hurt? When somebody is under attack, their car is being attacked by bottles or rocks or sticks. No one was hurt. Do you know those are scars that never leave a person? That's like a traumatic experience that never leaves a person. It's there always. Scar is there forever. Person is not able to sleep. People, children aren't able to control their bowels and they start wetting the beds. But no one was injured. No one was hurt. Yeah, no one was hurt. Everything I'm saying right now, remember, it's killing me softly. Killing me softly. Trying to create a business as usual. Everything's cool. Everything's calm, cool, and collective. At Rabbi Itamar's funeral in the Mountain of the Blessings, Har Bracha, once again there were people that yelled out for vengeance, to stop the cycle against the Jewish people. And they were hushed by some people in the crowd. Other times, people that cried out to put a stop to all this, they were handed over to the police, if you could believe it. Yeah, Jews handing other Jews over to the police. Once again, killing me softly. Thank you. Let's hush this up. Let's make this as smooth and clear. Let's just get back to our old routine, which of course, the old routine, we all know, 3 dots, what the old routine is. It's attacks, more attacks, more attacks. Unfortunately,
I'm going to come back tomorrow to
gotta find something more sturdy.
okay, in an unbelievable op-ed on the 7 News, a certain rabbi wrote the following: "We will take vengeance." Don't get too excited, folks. "We will take vengeance that the enemy will not know where to run away." I'm translating as I'm reading into English. For every rabbi that you kill, we will create 10 Torah classes. For every mother that you kill on our side, we will match 10 couples and marry them off. For every child that you slaughter, we will make 10 more classes in schools. For every couple that you slaughter, we will create another class for parents to learn about how to be the best parents they could be and how to educate their kids. The rabbi goes on to write that we never wanted to hurt those that are innocent bystanders. But however, since you've been coming to destroy us, and you destroy people that are innocent individuals, this you have brought unto yourself. What have you brought unto yourself? Listen to these words. The tremendous light that we will bring as a result of you killing us, softly, I might add, the tremendous light that we will create Torah classes, or we will create Jewish education for parents, how to educate their kids, or parental classes. This tremendous light will will blind all of you. You will all be affected by this light. From this light that we will create, the light that we will create by these new Torah classes and new classes of kids and marrying off couples, all this tremendous light will put you in the dark, and you will understand, finally, the evil that you have perpetrated. I mean, if I could, I know that we're coming close, we're 2 weeks away from Purim, but to me, this is unbelievable. This is totally disgusting. This is totally disgusting. And if he was alone, we could say, you know what, this guy's a loner. But let me tell you something. We hear over and over again, when you go to these funerals and you listen, I have a famous expression that I've used for so many years, 20, 30 years here in Israel, that the only thing worse than the murder itself is listening afterwards to the politicians or sometimes to the rabbis, listening to their eulogies. That is worse than the murder itself. And what have they been talking about? Let me tell you, they've been talking about, they have this expression, it's unbelievable, it's totally sick, it's sickening. Bibinyan haaretz tenucham. May God console you by seeing the building of Eretz Yisrael. Can you imagine that? Jews are being murdered, Jews are being attacked, Jews are being injured, hospitalized. Jews are afraid to travel. Jews are afraid to come to Jerusalem. Jews are afraid to travel to Judea and Samaria. And they're coming to these bereaved families that have suffered, kids, husbands, wives, whoever, and they're telling them that you should be consoled by God in the building of the land of Israel, where for thousands of years Jews have said, Hashem yikom damam. Jews have said, may God avenge this murder. May we see vengeance. Like King David says in Psalms, may we see the vengeance of the wicked. There was a satire that I wish it was funny, but it's not too funny. There was a satire that was taken out that was saying, we're looking for volunteers to die. Those that are interested in dying, please contact us, because every Jew that we will be able to murder, we will be able to set up a new settlement. And for every Jew that's murdered, we'll be able to build new bypass roads. And for every Jew that's murdered, we'll be able to recognize certain settlements. I wish it was funny, but it's not. Because it's disgusting to listen to so-called leaders of Israel talking like there is some kind of compensation here. There's some kind of compensation that if a Jew is murdered, then we will, that Jew is worth recognition. And we come along and say, no. We come along and say that every Jew is generations. He would have brought, or she would have brought in another 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 kids. And therefore, afterwards, those grandchildren that we'll never see. So add on to that. And their great-grandchildren. We're talking about each person has within them. I'm not talking about the light that they bring to the world. I'm just talking about the continuation of the Jewish chain, what they bring to the world. And you're selling us for recognition? Well, you could take your recognition and you know what to do with it. Who the hell needs your recognition? We're recognized from the creation of the world. God recognized at the land of Israel. I don't need your recognition. I want Jews alive. I don't want frightened Jews. Killing me softly. It's an unbelievable halacha. It's in the Code of Jewish Law, book Yoredea, 364, chapter 364, Law 4. It's written there that if a Jew is murdered by non-Jews, they are not to be touched, they're not to be put in a ritual bath, cleansed, they are not to be given the traditional garb that a Jew that passes away is given. And they have to be left as is. You have to gather up the blood, you have to gather up all the bloody clothes, and if it's shoes, pants, whatever. And that's the way the person is buried. What's the idea behind? Shouldn't it seems like kind of a disrespect for the dead person. However, the Taz in paragraph 5 in this Code of Jewish Law, he says an amazing law, amazing Torah. He says, why is this that a Jew that is murdered by a non-Jew has to be buried in his bloody clothes? Or the weapon to be buried that was used against him? It's in order to make people furious and revenge this dead Jew's murder. To bring people to become furious, angry, mad. Forget this hushing up, forget this killing me softly. It's good for Roberta Flack, but it ain't good for the Jewish people. There's 2 points that after our class last week I ran into, and they're very important points, so I'm going to add them. Number 1, the first point is in a Rishon named Chizkuni. The portion was last week, Exodus 23, verse 27. It says in the verse that God will place the fear of God on the nations that reside in the land of Israel. This is before the Jewish people are coming into the land of Israel. God says He will place the fear of God onto the nations that live in Israel when the Jewish people come in. So listen to this. It says in that verse, to all the people and all the nations there. Why does it add the word all? It just say nations, the nations there. Why all? So we know that every word in the Torah is precious. There is no extra word, or there's no extra letter. In fact, if we're missing a letter, that Torah is not a kosher Torah. So why did it add this extra word, all? So this is a tremendous lesson. We spoke about it last week. Just I found another source to this. So the Chizkuni writes, and once again, this is a Rishon. This is not somebody in our generation. So this is going back, way back. So he says, why does it use the word all? Because this includes not only the 7 nations, the famous 7 nations, who we are told. We have a tremendous Rishon here, the Chizkuni, on Exodus 23, 27. He asks, why is there an extra word that God will place His fear within the inhabitants? And it says, the inhabitants, all the inhabitants. Why does it add the word all? And then he says an unbelievable Torah. His answer is unbelievable. He says there's 2 types of people in the land of Israel. There are, of course, the 7 nations, which today, of course, do not exist. So the law, as far as the 7 nations were concerned, their law was to wipe them out. But here, he's not talking about wiping people out. He's talking about placing fear of God into them, placing the fear of the Jewish people into them. Who are these people? I mean, if you're wiped out, you're wiped out. But he writes that the reason why it says all inhabitants is to include others that are not part of the 7 nations. And once again, we see that many people would like to believe that what the Torah says to expel the residents of the land of Israel, that was talking about thousands of years ago, 3,300 years ago, in the time of Joshua, but it's no longer applicable. Not so at all. We see in so many sources that this includes nations that are not part of the 7 nations, but those that are enemies of the Jewish people. In another place, Chizkuni, on Exodus 24:8, he says an unbelievable line, and let's remember this all our lives. He asks a great question on this verse. He says, this, we talked about last week, how Moses took an animal and sacrificed and took the blood and split the blood in half in 2 basins, and then half of the blood was thrown on the Jewish people, half of the blood was thrown on the altar. So the Chizkuni, again here, he says this is very unusual because we know that there was a custom when they made a covenant in the old days. They would take an animal and they would split the animal in half, and they would walk in the middle between the 2 halves of the animal. This is seen many times. This was seen, for example, in Abraham when he made a covenant with God at the beginning of Lech Lecha. This was in the book of Jeremiah. This is also, this was a common type of a custom that they would have in order to make a covenant between 2 sides. They would split an animal into half, and they would walk, both of them would walk side by side between the 2 halves. This was the covenant. So he says, what's going on here? Why is this a covenant with blood? We've never seen such a covenant that Moses is spilling the blood on the Jewish people on the altar. Listen to the answer. Let us engrave it on our hearts. He writes the following, that when the Jewish people do not do God's will, they have to understand that the covenant says that God will come against them, come against the Jewish people with outpouring fury and wrath and vengeance. That's what the Chizkuni said. This is an amazing thing when we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing, when we're not following the laws of the Torah. Hashem says he will punish us. He will punish us, and the vengeance will be on us. The blood will be on us. It all stems from the Jewish people, from a lack of sticking to the Torah, sticking to our God. So this is what he's saying. This is what we see in front of our eyes. It's really amazing. I was just, when I hitched here today, you know, sometimes things hit you, sometimes they don't. But when I got off at the Tapuach intersection, and I lift up my head when I got out of the car, and I see a great rock. Okay, and I see a gigantic rock, and it's a memorial for a Jew that was murdered 2 years ago at that spot at Tapuach intersection. I walk across the street, and there's one of these rock memorials again. You know, like let's rock. But that's not what they're talking about when we say let's rock. And there's another Jew that was murdered across the street from there. So we see this promise that was brought down in the commentary of the Chizkuni. We see this happening before our very eyes. When the Jewish people, we're not in the proper place that we should be. In order to understand what's happening here in the land of Israel, there's a need. I'm going to try to do this as quick as possible with God's help, but there's a very, very important to understand what we're talking about here. The Chizkuni says straight out, if the Jewish people are not following in Hashem's path, then there will be vengeance, there will be fury against the Jewish people. This is what we're seeing. So I'm going to read and summarize, because it's all in Hebrew. I'm summarizing various items that were sent to me in the news. Listen to this, and we'll get a little bit of a picture of what's happening here. That unfortunately, there's a certain vocal minority, and they're in key positions, political positions, governmental positions. There's a small minority that they have lifted the flag to fight and to do battle against the Torah, against the land of Israel, and against Judaism. And we will see here what I'm talking about. Number one, the former chief of the Supreme Court. I'm not going to mention his name because I don't like mentioning wicked people's names, but he was the previous one, head of the chief of Supreme Court. He was interviewed in a leading Israeli newspaper recently, and he was quoted to say that he would not allow the religious courts in Israel to take upon themselves any monetary cases. He is against this, the former chief of the Supreme Court justice, so to speak, system. He is against allowing rabbi judges, to judge according to the Jewish law monetary disputes between Jews. To this responded the present chief rabbi of Israel, Rabbi Yitzchak Yosef, who's Rabbi Ovadia Yosef's son. He wrote there, listen to this, that the Israeli courts are far worse than any Gentile court in the world. Yeah, you heard it right there. The chief rabbi of Israel is saying that the court system in Israel, the secular court in Israel, is worse than the Gentile courts all over the world. Rav Yosef concluded his comments to say that this chief of the Supreme Court judges is continuing in his war against Judaism. His words, not mine. The war against Judaism. Okay, now let's take you to a different place. Welcome to Ramat Beit Shemesh. Ramat, okay, the Anglos call it RBS. Yeah, for short. Ramat Beit Shemesh, got it, RBS. So welcome to Ramat Beit Shemesh. In Ramat Beit Shemesh, there are certain communities that are, we'll call it knitted kippot. They wear the knitted skull caps, and there's certain communities there in Ramat Beit Shemesh that go around with the hat and suit community. So we're talking about the ones that go with the hats and the suits. So for the last couple of weeks, there is a group of teenagers from a moshav next door. I'm not going to mention the name of the moshav because I'm sure there's a lot of good people there, so I don't want to give it a bad name. But there's a moshav next to Ramat Beit Shemesh, RBS, and on the last couple of weeks on Shabbos, there are a group of teenagers that come into the religious section of Ramat Beit Shemesh, and they sick their dogs. They sick their dogs on religious boys and girls. Can you imagine this? Vicious dogs. They're going around and sicking them on these kids, and the kids are freaking out. They're crying, they're yelling, they're screaming for their lives. So this is not happening in Nazi Germany with their dogs. This is not happening in Poland. This is happening in Ramat Beit Shemesh. These are not Arabs. These are Jews. These youths were, besides for sicking their dogs, these vicious dogs on these kids, they also run with all kinds of sticks. And they're yelling that anybody that comes close to them, they will kill them. They also, of course, curse, use bad language, and they talk about the dirty religious Jews. Not only that, after a few weeks of this Shabbat atmosphere here in RBS, so a group of religious Jews went to the police in Beit Shemesh to complain. There they were met by one of the mothers of these teenagers, and I wanted to quote a few things that she had to say to religious Jews. Okay, it's a mother of one of these terrorists that go around with vicious dogs and sticks and attacking kids. She says the following: we should kill all of you. Yeah, that's great. I'm sure she's sitting in prison today, you know. Yeah, yuck, yuck. Little joke there. Why are there religious Jews in the world? And if any of you religious Jews come to our village, our community, we will make sure that you will not leave the community alive. Yeah, okay, you heard it right over here. You can check it out on kikar.co.il. Now, moving on. Mike, are we okay over here? Are we okay? Yeah. Okay, next, to understand the atmosphere, to understand the commentator Chizkuni, when the Jewish people, when we're off the mark. Now this is an article, this is an interview by a former chief rabbi of the IDF. He was responsible for the northern part of the land of Israel. He was the chief rabbi of the northern units of the army, and he retired 3 years ago. And here's what he has to say. There's a big push right now in the Israel army trying to create mixed units. Now, when I say mixed units in Israel, sometimes it's misunderstood. We're not talking about Arabs and Jews. That's what people outside the land of Israel. We're talking about men and women in the same units. Now, there is a commandment. There is one commandment that is connected to the army, which is that the army has to be a holy encampment. In order for God to, so to speak, reside and to dwell in our army bases, there is one condition. That condition has to be a holy place. Now, when men and women are mixed, intertwined, this is not holiness. This is exactly the opposite. In fact, you could go around and take pictures, various hitching posts around our area here. When there's a woman soldier mixed with one or two men soldiers, look how, quote unquote, look how intense their guarding of the intersection is. Of course, I'm joking that they're concentrating on one another instead of concentrating on the hitchhikers and what's going on around them. Well, now they have boy meets girl, girl meets boy, and their mind is taken off their duty, which is supposed to be to guard that intersection. Very simple. You know, it's a very simple lesson over here. So he's saying the following, that what the army is trying to do now to force religious people to be in units with females. This is something that we are not allowed to accept. We are not allowed to accept. This is a situation where you are bringing people to sin even against their will. You're putting people in too much of a test. And one after another are falling. He tells about, once again, this is a rabbi who for 20 years was the chief rabbi responsible for the northern part of Israel, or the army bases. So he's a guy that knows. He talks to thousands and thousands of people. He's talking about at all levels of the army. We're talking about officers. We're talking about regular soldiers. We're talking about religious soldiers. We're talking about secular soldiers. There is no difference. People are falling. People are transgressing sexual and immodest behaviors that they're doing right in the army. Right in the middle of their units. I have officers who have come up to me and told me how they when they were in the army, in reserves, they cheated on their wives, and they come up to me to ask what they could do now. I had talks about a woman soldier that was in a very, very small unit of fighters, and she she became pregnant. And this is one of many cases that he talks about that are happening. He says if you go out to the intersections and you see wherever there are male and female soldiers put in the same intersection, you'll see that the level of garduit, the level of, of being on the lookout goes down tremendously. He talks about the Rabbi Benny Machluf. That's who we're talking about here. He speaks about, right now he's talking about the present chief rabbi of the entire IDF, the Israel Defense Force. His name is Rabbi Ayal Karim. He says he's a tremendous scholar and he's a very good person, but he's a very, very soft kind of person, and we need somebody that's going to be strong like, strong like a lion here. And this is unbelievable. Listen to what he says. What happened was that the chief rabbi of the IDF, of the Israel Defense Forces, received an order by the chief of staff of the army that he is not allowed to contact or consult the chief rabbi of Israel on any Jewish law issues. Can you imagine that? He's not allowed. This is like, the only I love that expression. The only democracy in the Middle East. I spoke about 15 minutes ago, I spoke about a woman, very righteous woman, 5 kilometers away from Tapuach in Rechelim. She has some website. She tells about what's going on in Judea and Samaria, all the dozens and dozens of daily attacks that you'll never hear about anywhere. And she was just interviewed by Channel 7, Arut Sheva, and she talks about how she and other people that post her website are being threatened by the Secret Service of Israel. She's being threatened for putting on news events. I mean, and this rabbi, the chief rabbi of the IDF, is threatened that he's not allowed to consult with any Jewish law matters with the chief rabbi of Israel. Man, like, who do you go to? Who do you talk to if you have a question? And it gets worse. Two very, very prominent rabbis in the religious Zionist community, Rabbi Shlomo Aviner and Rabbi Shmuel Eliyahu, they recently came out against these mixed units with men and women. And after they came out with their statements, after they went public, from that time on, there's an order now that they are not allowed into any of the army bases to visit soldiers, to encourage soldiers to give a talk or to visit any of the bases once after they did this. Not only that, the Rabbi Eyal Karim, no, not to be messed up with Karim Abdul-Jabbar. No, I don't think there's any relation between Karim and Karim. But Rabbi Karim sent a text to all the rabbis of the army, the present rabbis of the army, that if they criticize the army, listen to this. This is a quote from Rabbi Benny Machluf. He's quoting that all rabbis in the army received a text message from the chief rabbi of the Israeli army, Rabbi Eyal Karim, that if they respond with any type of criticism against the army policies, they might find themselves without a job. You heard that right. The only democracy in the Middle East, if this is not a dictatorship, what's going on here, well, then I don't know what is. They asked Rabbi Machluf, who's giving this interview, who was the chief rabbi of the northern division of the army, if he's not afraid, why isn't he afraid? He says, listen, you have to speak the truth, even if you have to pay a price. So I'm speaking the truth. let's go on. Some more things that are happening in Israel. For the last couple of weeks, the Eruv, an Eruv is something that allows a Jew on the Sabbath to carry or to use a buggy for their children. So the last couple of weeks in two religious neighborhoods, one in Kiryat Yovel and the second in Beit Vagan, for the last couple of weeks, these communities have suffered that sometime during the Sabbath, people that are Jewish anti-Semites come by and they destroy the Eruv. So therefore, once they destroy it, a Jew is not allowed to carry it. This makes the Sabbath extremely difficult. You're not allowed to, you want to take your kids to visit grandparents, you can't put them in the buggy. This is problematic. So the vice mayor of Jerusalem, his name is Dov Kalmanovich. He lives actually, used to reside in Beit El, and he said the following, that the police have to come in here and do something. Why can't they put up cameras? Why can't they put up cameras and catch the perpetrators? He says of late, of the last couple of months, this is the words of Dov Kalmanovich, there have been extreme anti-religious elements responsible for hatred against religious Jews. So we have, in the state of Israel, we have very interesting phenomena of anti-Semites who happen to be of the Jewish persuasion. Going on to our situation. Recently, there was one of these tunnels that the Hamas in Gaza dug, an unbelievable tunnel. This tunnel touched upon three areas. It touched upon what they call Israel. It went into, of course, Gaza, and it also touched into Egypt. It was 180 meters. It was a certain place where it touched like three borders. They made this gigantic underground tunnel in order to attack Jews or to kidnap Jews. And Israel announced, listen to this is really amazing. Israel announced at 10 o'clock that evening, where they said the following, that they announced to all the Arabs and they handed out literature all over that tomorrow this crossing, it's called the Kerem Shalom crossing, near Gaza, near Egypt, near Israel. It will be closed tomorrow. Be closed. Very interesting. Why is it closed? At 10:30, a half hour later, the tunnels were destroyed. So once again, at 10 o'clock, there was a message on the loudspeakers. There was a message that was given out to the Arabs of Gaza that for the next day, for tomorrow, this crossing, the Kerem Shalom crossing, will be closed. Like, duh. So the Arabs understood that it's probably a good idea to get out of that tunnel. So this is Israel's way that that nobody is in the tunnel, and they're just destroying as if the tunnels are the problem and not the people that are building the tunnels or the people that are perpetrating terror against the Jewish people. The problem is the cement over there. So this way, unbelievable, instead of killing potential Jew killers, it's more important for Israel to make sure that there's no terrorists in that tunnel. Not only that, this past October, there was a tunnel that was blown up, and there happened to be various big-name terrorists in that tunnel. And then Israel apologized that they had no intention and they didn't know that there were any people in that tunnel. And they apologized for the fact that people were killed. It's an amazing thing. This goes along with the present chief of staff. The President Chief of Staff was quoted at the beginning of the year saying, "We do not follow the Talmud policy of those that come to kill us, we will kill you first." We do not follow that policy. I mean, can you imagine sending your kid into this army of this monster? I mean, they are endangering our children, our lives, in order to be merciful to the enemy. Not only that, they have this phrase that they like to throw out. They think it's cute. It's called knock on your door or knock on your roof policy. What's it called? Knock on the roof or knock on your door? What happens is when Israel wants to destroy this, they have this new policy that when they want to destroy a house, they want to make sure that, none of the terrorists or their families are in the house. So what they do is they shoot something near the door or near the house or on the roof. And this is the warning side to get out. They pre-warn the enemies to get out of the house, that God forbid that we should eliminate potential Jewish murderers. In a central base here in Samaria, in the Shomron, soldiers are told to use karate and kung fu tactics against women terrorists in order not to upset the Muslim population. Like this is, remember the song, like, Bruce Lee, like, what in the world, like kung fu fighting? Those kicks were fast as lightning. Instead of upsetting the Muslim residents, so when you're greeted by a woman terrorist that's about to blow you away, make sure not to shoot, please, because that's going to antagonize the Arabs. Make sure to pull out your Bruce Lee move and kick it out. A year ago, an Arab truck driver ran over a group of soldiers. It could be seen anywhere on the YouTube. You see all the soldiers ran away. When they were asked why they run away, they said that's the policy, to run away. Actually, not everybody ran away. There happened to be the tour guide who was giving the soldiers a tour at the time. He was the only guy, even though he was injured by that incident, the Arab truck driver ramming and rolling over people, running over people. He was the only person that went and chased after, tried to get that terrorist. Well, since then, folks, I'm happy to tell you that he has not been invited back to any more tours for the IDF. He's not our kind of man, of course. And just 2 days ago, this is really up to date, just 2 days ago, there were 4 soldiers that their ways was ways off, and they got into, they went into Jenin. They're all armed. All soldiers are armed, and they almost were lynched there. Nobody fired any shots. None of these soldiers fired any shots. They have guns. They were all armed, and they were attacked by a mob. Nobody got out. Nobody stopped to shoot. Nobody ran them over to stop the incident. Actually, they were bloodied. And of course, there was a girl soldier there, and it's not such a pretty face to see what happened to her. The last point we made about the murder of Rabbi Itamar Ben Gal was that this happened the week of the time when we read the portion, not only the portion of the week, but an additional portion called Shkalim. Shkalim is also next to the one after this, This is a time of year where we read 4 special additional portions to the portion of the week. The first is called Shkalim, which means coins. Second one is Zachor, to remember what the archenemy of the Jewish people, Amalek, did to the Jewish people. And of course, Purim is Haman. Haman was a descendant of the Amalek family. So let's see the connection between what happened to Rabbi Itamar, what's happening to us every day, Jews being attacked. And let's discuss the connections here. So number one, it says in the Talmud, Yerushalmi, the second page, first side, it says the following. Rabbi Abba says, the son of Rabbi Acha, that it's hard to understand the Jewish people. When the Jewish people were asked by the multitudes, by the Erev Rav, those converts that left Egypt, but not for the sake of heaven, kind of like hitchhikers jumping aboard the bandwagon, joining the bandwagon. So when they came and they asked the Jewish people to join in with them to worship the golden calf, the Jewish people agreed, and they gave tremendous amounts of money, silver, and gold in order to build this golden calf. On the other hand, look at the Jewish people. When Moses comes up to them and said, listen, we need money to build the tabernacle, they also gave tremendous amounts. So Rabbi Abba is saying, I really can't understand these Jewish people. So the second connection between money, coins, and this time of the year is we find in the tractate of Megillah, page 13, side B. It says the following. Haman was willing to give 10,000 shekel, 10,000 coins, to King Achashverosh in order to agree to his plan to annihilate the Jewish people, to genocide against the Jewish people. He was willing to give 10,000. So Reish Lakish comes around and says the following, that God understood that this wicked person, Haman, was willing to sacrifice so much money for his hate program to annihilate the Jewish people, that God made sure that the Jewish people would have a merit when it comes to money. What would the merit be? That from the time that the Jewish people were in the desert, Moses collected money, okay? And the various commentators explain that if you take the amount of Jews that gave this half shekel coin, it comes up to, amazingly, to that same amount of money that Haman gave over to the king Achashverosh, which is 10,000 pieces of gold coins. So Haman was a person, he knew a lot of details in the Torah. We always know that there were tremendously wicked dictators. They knew a thing or two about Judaism. So it says here that God knew that the day would come where a person would sacrifice such a large amount of money for an evil, he's willing to lose all this money for an evil proposal. So we need the Jewish people for a positive, for a holy proposal, to be willing to give up their money. So that's why when it comes, every year when it comes to the month of Adar, in the times of the temple, and also today we have a custom to continue this, when Adar comes in, hits in, and before Purim, we give this half shekel coin. Give this half shekel coin. Remembering the merit of the Jewish people, that we too are willing to give of our monetary, of our finances for good causes, for the sake of, for charity and for the sake of heaven. So, listen to this. There's an amazing, we're going to read an amazing line here. On this Gemara, there's a commentator. The book is called Asefat Kenim. It was written by Rabbi Natan Tzvi Hirsch Passis. And he writes an unbelievable Torah. And remember, engrave this on your heart. And this has to be passed on to all. He talks about the connection between these two Sabbaths. The Sabbath where we read Shkalim, giving of the coins, and the Sabbath before Purim, when we talk about the mitzvah to remember to annihilate Amalek that came to annihilate us. And he speaks about the connection between money and the enemy, annihilating the enemy. Listen closely to his words. Remember them forever. He says the following. Here's the connection between the two. When God knew that there would come a day when an evil person like Haman would be willing to forgo so much of his money because of his hatred of the Jewish people in order to annihilate them. This would cause a tremendous boomerang, prosecution against the Jewish people. Why? Because here we have a guy who's willing to give up such a substantial amount of funds, of his money, in order to annihilate his enemy, being the Jewish people. And then this is going to be a reminder. Listen to these words. This will be a reminder that the Jewish people in the time of the judges and in the time of the prophets, they did not expel the Gentile inhabitants from the land at the time that they were conquering the land of Israel. Why? Because of the fact that they wanted to utilize these inhabitants for cheap labor. Can you imagine this? This is an amazing piece here. They left. One of the major reasons that God tells them when you come into the land, you have to expel the inhabitants. So why were so many inhabitants left? Why were so many tens of thousands of people left? And here we are showed a tremendous secret here. The reason why they were left is because the Jewish people wanted to make some bucks on their backs. They wanted to save some money. And this way they would have the use of these nations to be their workforce. And we wouldn't have to pay double or triple salary for the same work for Jews. So this, and it even gets better here. Listen to his words. Because of the fact that they desired their money more than God's commandment here to expel the inhabitants, instead of, and what happened was, because of their love of money, this erased their hatred that they should have had for their enemies. Can you imagine? This is like the news today. This is like the news today. I mean, I hate to say it, but where Rabbi Itamar was killed, where he lives, in the Mount Bracha, and in most settlements, and in most places in Israel, we are utilizing cheap labor instead of paying Jews a regular or normal salary that they could live respectively. We are favoring, because of saving a few shekels, we are favoring the enemy. And the Sefat Zkenim in his commentary is saying it, that a love of money came, and instead of hating the enemy, we began to hire the enemy. And he says, and he brings it down now to the story of Purim, that the same thing is true. Why did King Saul keep the king of Amalek? Why did he allow him to live? God gave him a commandment to eliminate all forces, all people that are part of the Amalek nation. So why did he leave the king? So the Torah teaches us that the reason why he left the king of Amalek was because of the fact that he thought that we could get rich if we kept the king alive. Then we would know where his treasures are and his wealth is, etc. So that's why he kept the king alive. God says to eliminate all of them, all these Amaleks, and he does not listen. And it all stems from money. So that's the connection, folks. An amazing connection between the Shabbat of coins, of money, and remembering what Amalek did to the Jewish people. This is the connection, and this is what's happening here in the land of Israel. Because of a love of money, instead of the money going to fund the Jewish people and to fund people that are our family, the Jewish family, we are giving, because we want to save a couple of shekels, we are giving our enemies a tremendous base and foundation to continue living in the land of Israel and slowly eating away and destroying the country here. The last thing I wanted to say here, are we okay over here? Okay. Last thing, one of the last things here, I wanted to read statistics. These statistics, you could find them in a website called OECD. These are facts that compare Israel 30 years ago in 1987 compared to Israel 2017. So this is pretty up to date. Listen to the difference. Okay, we're talking about money. We're talking about, we know that money can do great things. It built the tabernacle, this week's portion. But also money does terrible things. Number one, money built the golden calf. Number two, it says in the Torah, don't let money blind you. Number three, we see in the land of Israel, we are keeping, you go in the cities, who's in all of the stores? Why don't they hire Jews? There's so many Jews that are out of work. Why aren't they hiring Jews? You know why? Because of cheap labor. They're utilizing the cheap labor that the Arabs, because who don't pay taxes, they're able to pay them much less. So in order to progress, because of money, this is blinding the hatred that we should have for our enemies. And instead of hatred for our enemies, we're hiring the enemies. So listen to the statistics here. Amazing statistics in the last 30 years. In 1987, there were 4.4 million residents in the land of Israel. 30 years later, there are 8.75 million residents. It's an increase of 99%. Life expectancy in 1987 was 75 years. Today, it's 82 years. This is an increase of 9%. For every 1,000 residents, citizens of Israel, in 1987, 171 out of 1,000 people had vehicles. Today, out of every 1,000 people, 398 people have vehicles. It's an increase of 133%. Tax burden on the citizens. In 1987, the tax bracket was 45%. Today, it's gone down to 30%. The burden of taxes have gone down on the citizens of Israel by 33% compared to 30 years ago. The commodities of Israel, what Israel produces, in 1987, it was $35 million. In 2017, 30 years later, it's gone up to $358 billion. It's an increase of 923%. The GDP, the gross domestic product of Israel, in 1987 was 8. Today, it's 41. That's an increase of 413%. The GDP went up 413%. The foreign exchange reserves in Israel were, in 1987, they were $4 billion. Today, there are $112 billion in foreign exchange reserves. It's an increase of 2,700%. Energy, independent energy in Israel. In 1987, Israel had independent energy, 4%. Today, it's 65% of the energy that we have is independent. It's an increase of 1,525%. the inflation in 1987, the inflation rate was 16%. Today it's 0.3%, a decrease of 0.98. Once again, what are we doing? Are we building golden calves? Or are we building places of holiness, places of Torah, of modesty? What are we doing with this money? Is this money blinding us? As it says, do not accept money because it's a bribe. Do not accept money. A judge is not allowed to accept money. So are we accepting bribes? Are we utilizing the money for good purposes? Are we trying to turn Israel into some kind of modern European country here? There's an expression in Israel. In the Talmud. It says in the Talmud that the redemption of the Jewish people will not come till they despair from the redemption. Till they will despair from the redemption. Now, if you go around the religious Zionist community in their yeshivot, they have a line that they have, maybe it's from Rav Tzvi Cook, who explains, what does that mean that the redemption will not come until the Jewish people are despair from the redemption? So Rav Tzvi, I think, not sure that he says it, but it's definitely said in his name. They mention that, what does that mean? Is that people are despairing the way that God has chosen to bring the redemption, which means people are despairing when they see the Knesset, when they see the IDF, when they see the state of Israel, how it's being run. They are despairing because they say that that's not the redemption, that's not the way God's going to bring the redemption. So that's what they're saying. So they're all smiley and saying, that's what the Talmud is saying, that the redemption will not come until we will despair from the way that God has chosen to bring the redemption. And God has chosen the secular way of government, secular way of the army, the way the country is being run now. This is the way that he's chosen to bring the redemption. And the religious, the black hat communities, they are despairing from this. So therefore the redemption is very close. I've always felt that this was not correct. I always felt something else, but I was a little bit shy to say it until I found that in Europe, the head of the yeshiva of Telz, Rav Yosef Yehuda Leib Bloch, in his work, in his composition Shiurei Dat, the 3rd volume, page 65, he says an unbelievable thing, and this is what I was thinking. I'm just going to add a little bit to what he said. What does it mean that the redemption will not come until the Jewish people despair for the redemption, from the redemption? What does that mean exactly? So he says the following, that during the generations there were many people that made a mistake as far as the redemption was concerned. For example, in previous generations, there were many people that believed that the way to bring the redemption was through all types of modern, using holy names, using Kabbalistic kind of methods to bring the redemption. And in our times, once again, this is probably 90 years ago, 100 years ago. So Rav Bloch, in our times, we have people that believe that with all kinds of, where's his words here? All kinds of physical ways and all kinds of trickery to bring the redemption. People think, so I'm going to take his words and just like refine them a little bit. What I think the rabbi is saying here, and it's pretty clear, he was talking about the beginning of the Zionist movement. So he's talking about all kinds of natural ways to bring the redemption. So hundreds of years ago, people tried to bring the redemption through spiritual, quote unquote, spiritual ways. Now they're trying to bring it through natural means, and the redemption will not come till we despair from these types of means. But my humble opinion is the following, that what the Talmud was telling us thousands of years ago is the following, that, and this message is especially for the religious Zionist community, that the redemption of God will not come until we despair from the secular form that we see here in Israel. We've allowed them 70 years. It's coming up now. 70 years. It's a long time. 70 years we've allowed them. They've been in the army, and they're in the media, and they're in the government. And we said that if we just, become involved in the government, if we become involved in the media, if we become involved in the army, if we become involved in all the wings of government and running of the state, we will change it around. But we see the truth of the matter is that the spiritual state in the land of Israel has gone down, as what we read in all these newspaper clips, or all these internet clips. We see, on one hand, for sure, there are many thousands of Jews that are strengthening themselves. We don't fool ourselves, for sure. But there's a small group, and they're not going anywhere. And the damage that they're doing to the Jewish people, if it's Sabbath observance we talked about last week, this war against Judaism, they are succeeding more and more and more. And the redemption will not come until we realize that the redemption is not coming through this vehicle. The vehicle of the Knesset, the vehicle of the IDF as it stands today, the vehicle of the present state of Israel, it will not come. And we have to wake up. It's only going to come when there is an ideological revolution, when there is a Torah revolution, that the true Torah people in the land of Israel will create an ideological revolution, changing the thought process in this country. As long as we keep on wasting resources and our time and our breath and our lives to join the forces of the Knesset and the IDF and all these other groups, that of course there are good things that all of them do, but all in all, we are taking our minds off the redemption. The redemption will not come until we despair from these organizations, from the establishment. It will not come. There's no way that the redemption will come, because the redemption will be stopped. They will fight against this type of redemption. They're not going to bring it. They will be the first ones to fight. That's why it says in the book of Zechariah that parts of the Jewish people will fight against the coming of the Messiah. That, in my humble opinion, that is what the Rabbi Bloch is saying here, that the redemption of the Jewish people will only come after we despair from that the present establishment of the state of Israel will bring upon us the redemption. That has to change. Until that time, where the revolution, the ideological revolution will come, I wanted to remind all of us that every person in the land of Israel is a soldier. Whether you're wearing green or you're not wearing green, you don't have to wear green, because every Jew, if you're driving, if you're hitching, if you're outside, wherever you are in this country, you are a soldier. And there are laws of soldiers in the Torah. And the Torah tells us, the Rambam brings it down in the book of Shoftim, on chapter 7, law 17, says the following, that a soldier goes out to battle, he has to forget about his family, he has to forget about his kids, about his friends. Why? You have to be totally immersed in your mission. The mission is to save the Jewish people. Your mission is to sanctify God's name. And any person that's fearful, and any person that gives off fear or influences people to become frightened and fearful, these people have blood, Jewish blood on their hands. This is an amazing law. This we have to always remember when we ever come. If any of us have a thought, maybe I won't travel, maybe I won't hitch, maybe I won't go outside, maybe I won't go to the market. When you have these thoughts, remember that this is no time. there's now a war. Not from today, not from yesterday, for a long time. But every one of us is a soldier in the Jewish army, in the army of God. And we are not allowed to show fear. We are not allowed to do things that are going to make ourselves fearful or put fear in other people's lives. We have to show strength in order that the enemy understands that, okay, we are not afraid of them. Because if the enemies, if they sniff out that we're afraid of them, we're finished off over here. So remember this law in the Rambam. Till the day comes of the revolution, the ideological revolution, which will come very soon in the land of Israel.